I found out on a Tuesday. Not by a call, not even a message, just a photo. A group picture at a long table, candles half melted, plates cleared except for the crumbs of a dessert I used to make. Everyone was there. My husband, his sisters, their spouses, my in-laws, even their neighbor's college-age daughter. Everyone, except me. I stared at that photo for longer than I should have, scanning it over and over like my name would appear if I looked hard enough. It didn't. My chair was never set. My presence never expected. There was no text saying, "Sorry, we forgot." No call the next morning. Just digital silence and a timeline filled with smiling faces pretending nothing was missing. At first, I told myself it had to be a mistake. Someone else was planning this dinner. Maybe his sister, maybe his mother. And in the shuffle, they assumed I'd be told. Or maybe it was casual, thrown together last minute. That's what I wanted to believe. I asked my husband about it that evening. I waited until after dinner, after the dishes were done, when the silence between us made the air feel like wet paper. I asked gently, like I was testing the strength of glass I already knew was cracked. He didn't flinch. He just blinked slowly, shrugged, and said, "Oh, I thought you knew. It wasn't anything formal." A pause. That pause told me everything. "No one said you couldn't come," he added, as if that mattered. But someone had said, loudly, by omission, and he had listened. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded, folded the dish towel, and put it away. Then I told him I was going for a walk. Instead, I called the restaurant. I asked if there was a reservation under his mother's name. There was. 12 guests, set for 7 p.m., just like the timestamp on the photo. I asked who made the reservation. She did, 2 weeks prior. Special instructions were listed. Private room. Cake to be brought out after entrees. No modifications to guest count. Fixed seating. 12 chairs. I arrived at the restaurant the next night. Not to make a scene, not even to confront anyone. I just needed to see it. Whatever was left. The ghost of the evening they didn't want me in. I wore a dark blue dress. Nothing flashy. Just something that said I remembered who I was before I shrank myself into their background. The host couldn't find my name on any reservation. He asked if perhaps it was under another name. I gave my husband's, then my mother-in-law's. His eyes flickered when I said hers. Then he smiled tightly and said, "That was last night, ma'am." I nodded. I told him I knew. That's when I saw her, across the lobby, standing near the bar, laughing at something someone said. She looked right at me, smiled, that smug, brittle little smile she always wore when she thought she'd won something. For a moment, I felt the sting in my throat, the one that comes before the tears, but I blinked it away. I didn't come for a confrontation. I came to remind myself what it felt like to walk into a room without permission. I was about to turn and leave when I heard my name. Not hers, mine. Is that you?" I turned. The man walking toward me looked older, but I recognized the voice. It was Robert, the owner. He hugged me like we were old friends, which we were. Years ago, before my life became so small. Back when I was designing interiors for boutique hotels and restaurants, his was one of them. I helped him launch this place, picked the textures, the lighting, even the wine glasses. He called me his secret weapon back then. He asked what brought me in. I didn't lie. I said I was supposed to be invited to a dinner. I wasn't. Thought I'd stop by anyway. He looked past me, toward the woman still standing near the bar, frozen in a fake conversation. His expression didn't change, but something in his tone shifted. "Well, if you're here," he said, "then you're my guest." He turned to the host and told him to prepare the private room, the same one from the night before. He walked me in himself. And when we entered, there they were, the whole family, mid-meal, forks halfway to mouths, laughter dying in their throats. I didn't look at her first. I looked at him, my husband. He didn't rise, didn't speak. He just stared like I was a glitch in a program that had run too smoothly. Robert clapped me on the shoulder, then told the table about how I saved his launch, how the design won awards, how grateful he was, how lucky they were to have someone like me in their family. And then he pulled out a chair, right at the head of the table. I sat down without looking at anyone directly, just let my fingers brush the linen napkin, my eyes settle on the half-finished plates, the smeared edges of untouched wine glasses. The room was too quiet, not tense, just paused, like they were waiting for me to scream, or cry, or walk out. I did none of those things. Robert stayed a moment longer, told the waiter to bring me the house special, on the house, and disappeared with the grace of someone who knew exactly what favor he'd just returned. Across the table, my mother-in-law lifted her wine. Her hand was steady, but her eyes didn't meet mine. She looked at the server, then at her plate, then at her daughter, anywhere but at me. Someone made a joke, something about déjà vu. It fell flat. I smiled politely, the way I had 1,000 times before when she said something designed to sting. The difference was, this time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to notice the blood. Dinner resumed. Conversations reattached themselves to abandoned threads. His sister started talking about her yoga studio expansion. Someone else chimed in about a renovation. No one asked me a thing. I ate slowly, carefully, not because I was nervous, because I wanted to savor it, this strange, tense little theater where I was the uninvited ghost sitting in her rightful seat. My husband didn't say a word to me the entire time. He asked his brother-in-law to pass the salt, he asked his niece how school was going, he asked the waiter for another glass of wine. But me? Nothing. And that silence, more than anything, told me what I needed to know. He knew. He knew I hadn't been invited. He knew why. He knew who made that call. And he let it happen. There was no oversight, no confusion. This wasn't a scheduling error or a forgotten message. This was a decision. A quiet, premeditated exclusion dressed up as family planning. And now, confronted with the evidence, me, sitting here, smiling, breathing, ruining the photo he was hoping to send out again this year, he had no idea what to do. I watched him cut his steak too slowly, watched him chew like he could stall time with his jaw. I wanted to ask him why. Why let her do this? Why not say my name when the host asked who else was coming? Why not tell me the truth? But I didn't. I wanted to see if he'd say it on his own. Spoiler, he didn't. Dessert came. Not the usual cake, but a warm crumble with vanilla ice cream. My favorite. I didn't touch it. I didn't need the symbolism. When the plates were cleared and the check discreetly placed near his father's elbow, I stood, smoothed the dress over my hips, and thanked Robert again on the way out. He smiled, just enough to let me know he understood. My husband followed me to the car. I heard his footsteps behind me, slower, unsure. "You didn't have to come," he said quietly. I stopped walking. I turned, looked at him like a stranger. "I know," I said. And I got in the car, alone. That night in bed, we didn't speak. His back was to me, like it had been for months, maybe years. And I realized something. It wasn't the exclusion that broke me. It was the silence that followed it. A silence so practiced, so mutual, it had become our native language. And I was done speaking it. The next morning, I woke up before him, not by much, but enough. The sun was just starting to climb the edge of the window pane, throwing pale gold light across the floor. I sat at the edge of the bed for a long time, watching the way the shadows moved. Quiet, still, detached. I didn't pack right away. I didn't even start a list. I just walked into the kitchen and made coffee the way I always did. Grind, measure, wait. It felt like muscle memory, like I was impersonating a version of myself that used to care. He came in an hour later, hair still damp from a shower. He didn't say good morning. He just reached for the mug I'd always poured for him and found it empty. I didn't pour it out of spite. I just didn't pour it. He stood there for a second, like he didn't know whether to speak or not. Eventually, he chose not to. I took my coffee to the balcony. I thought about the years I'd spent convincing myself that love looked like patience, that sacrifice was a currency, and eventually it would return with interest. I thought about all the birthdays I planned for his mother, the holidays I cooked through with a tight smile and sore feet, the apologies I made for him when he was too tired or too distracted or too indifferent. I thought about how I never asked for much, how I kept making myself smaller, thinking maybe then I'd fit into whatever space they had left for me. I didn't cry. I was past that. Instead, I got dressed. Jeans, simple top, no makeup, just myself, exactly as I was. I went into the office, the one we shared, technically, though I was the only one who ever really worked from it. I opened the drawer where I kept the papers he never bothered to read. Contracts, investment slips, receipts, every document with my signature on it backing his ventures when no bank would, every loan I co-signed, every asset I'd quietly protected. I'd built him a business, not out of generosity, but belief. I believed in him, in us, in something worth growing together. Now I saw it clearly. He had let them erase me because he knew I'd stay quiet, knew I'd take the insult like I always had, gracefully, invisibly. Not this time. I stacked the papers, not for him, for me. Proof that I existed, that my hands were in every brick he built his image on. He was in the living room when I came out, still scrolling through his phone, still pretending things would revert if we just stopped talking about them. I placed the folder on the table between us. He looked up. "What's this?" I didn't answer. He opened it, flipped through the pages. His brow furrowed the way it always did when he started reading things he should have known by heart. "You kept all of this?" Still, I said nothing. A long silence followed. Then, why now? I met his eyes, calm, cold, honest. "Because you let them treat me like I didn't matter, and you said nothing. That's why." He didn't argue. He didn't deny it. He just looked away, like the guilt was too ugly to hold. I walked past him, back into the bedroom, pulled out the suitcase from the back of the closet. Funny, it still had the airline tag from Bali. I packed methodically, not rushed, not angry, just finished. He stood in the doorway but didn't cross the threshold. "You're really going?" I zipped the suitcase shut. "I already did," I said. And I walked out. The door clicked behind me like a final punctuation mark. Not dramatic, not slammed, just final. The hallway was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows long decisions. I didn't look back, not at the door, not at the life behind it. I just walked, down the steps, through the lobby, into the sunlight. My car was still parked where I left it the night before. I unlocked it without thinking, set the suitcase in the trunk, and sat behind the wheel for a minute before starting the engine. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew where I wasn't staying. By noon, I had found a short-term rental, a small loft at the edge of the city, high ceilings, bare walls, and silence. Not the suffocating kind, the freeing kind. It felt strange being somewhere without his voice in the background, without the low hum of expectations hanging between every word, but it also felt clean, like breathing air that hadn't already passed through someone else's lungs. I unpacked what I needed, not much, just enough to remind myself that I still had agency, still had edges. I didn't bring the framed wedding photo, didn't bring the dress I wore to his sister's engagement party, didn't bring anything that smelled like compromise. That evening, I sat at the little table by the window, sipping tea, watching the city move beneath me. No one knew I was here. No one had asked. I thought about calling my mother, but I didn't. She'd ask too many questions I wasn't ready to answer. Instead, I opened my laptop. Not for distraction, for something more vital. I logged into the financial accounts I hadn't touched in months, the ones tied to my name, not his, the ones I started before the marriage, during my consulting years. They were still there, still whole, still mine, and I realized I hadn't just walked away, I had taken everything that mattered. The next few days passed like a quiet tide. I fell into my own rhythm again, coffee when I wanted it, music when I felt like it, thoughts uninterrupted. I made a list, not a bucket list, a reckoning list. Everything I gave, everything I lost, everything I was ready to reclaim. At the top of that list, control. Control of my time, my voice, my money. Control of the narrative. They had spent years casting me as the accessory, the wife, the background, the outsider they tolerated because he brought me in. But I wasn't background. I was foundation. And I would prove it. Quietly, legally, brilliantly. I started with the accounts, transferred my investments into a separate portfolio, shifted property rights where needed, reread the contracts I signed when his business was still on life support, and I was the only one willing to write the checks. The language was clear. My name was everywhere. I called a lawyer, not to sue, not to punish, just to clarify, to reinforce what I already knew. I hadn't just supported his ventures, I'd funded them. I'd built them. And if he wanted to pretend otherwise, he'd be doing it in court. Still, I didn't reach out, not to him, not to them. I didn't need the satisfaction of confrontation. I already had the power. It was a quiet kind of revenge, the kind that didn't need noise, just signatures. And in the silence of that loft, I began building again. Not for him, not for us, for me. There was something strangely soothing about structure. I found calm in spreadsheets, in color-coded folders, in checking off boxes that led to freedom. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about remembering I could still move mountains if I wanted to. I had just been too buried in their noise to hear the rumble. Days turned into weeks. I stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. I deleted the group chat with his family after noticing I hadn't received a single text since the night I left. Not even a "where are you?" Not even from him. He knew where I was. Maybe not the address, but he knew. And his silence was a confession. It told me everything I needed to know about how easy it was for him to let me go. But I wasn't broken. Not anymore. I started taking meetings again. At first, just consulting calls. Old clients who lit up when they saw my name pop back into their inbox. They remembered the way I worked, the way I delivered. I hadn't lost it. I'd just been hiding it under folded laundry and forced dinners. One morning, I got an email from a boutique hotel chain out of Chicago. They'd seen my name credited in a design article years ago, asked if I was available for a consultation on a new flagship location. I said yes without hesitation. 2 days later, I was on a plane, notebook in hand, vision clear. The hotel manager greeted me like I was a long-lost architect of their future. They had already studied my past work, trusted my taste. I walked through the empty halls of the site with blueprints tucked under my arm and silence in my ears. No one talking over me, no one second-guessing every choice I made. For the first time in years, I wasn't being tolerated. I was being trusted. That night, in my hotel room, I got a message from his sister. Just 2 words, "Are you okay?" I stared at it for a full minute, not because it moved me, but because I couldn't decide if it was guilt or curiosity. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my browser and searched his company, the one I helped build. Their newest product launch had flopped. The rollout was rushed, the design was shallow, reviews were brutal, investors were pulling back. I knew why. He didn't just lose a wife. He lost the quiet strategist behind the scenes, the one who read the data and rewrote the pitch, the one who knew how to design, not just spaces, but moments. And now, without me, everything was falling apart. I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt clean, like the rot was no longer mine to hide. I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and slept soundly for the first time in months.
Sleep became a kind of ceremony, not the restless kind where your body lies still but your mind sprints through what-ifs. No, this was earned. I stopped dreaming about them, his mother, his sisters, that frozen dinner table. My nights were mine now, uninvaded, unobserved. In the morning, I walked to the cafe on the corner, one of those quiet places with handwritten menus and real sugar cubes. The barista learned my name by the third day. By the fifth, he remembered my order. I didn't miss the suburban house with the manicured lawn and the silent dinners. I didn't miss the shallow niceties or the effort it took to remain digestible. What surprised me most was how little I missed him. When I did think of him, it wasn't with bitterness. It was with a dull sort of detachment, like remembering a novel you once loved, only to realize you outgrew it. And then it came, an email, from him. No subject line, just his name. I opened it slowly. It wasn't long, just a few sentences. He said he hoped I was okay, said things hadn't been easy, that the house felt empty, that he missed my voice. No apology, no ownership, just longing dressed up as reflection. I closed it, didn't reply, because I knew what that message was. It wasn't about me, it was about him. His silence had served him while I was still within arm's reach. Now it haunted him. And that wasn't my burden anymore. 2 weeks later, I returned to finalize the design contract with the hotel group. They offered me a 6-month retainer, plus travel expenses, plus full creative control. I accepted. And just like that, I wasn't rebuilding. I was rising. One afternoon, while reviewing fabric swatches, I got a second message, this time from his mother. A forwarded chain of emails about the company's financial problems. She added one line at the bottom. I always knew he wasn't ready to lead alone. I stared at that line, my mouth curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. She had tried to erase me, and now, without me, they were unraveling. Still, I didn't respond. Because silence, when chosen, is more powerful than any reply. Instead, I called my lawyer, asked him to initiate a formal withdrawal of all my stake in the company, made it clear that my exit would be orderly, but visible. Let them see who walked. Let them feel the difference. He tried to call 3 times. I let each one ring until it stopped. He left one voicemail. His voice sounded small, tired, like someone trying to rewind something that had already played through. He said he didn't understand why I left like that. And that, right there, told me everything. If you don't understand the silence, you never listened during the noise. The funny thing about leaving is how long it takes to feel gone. You change your address, you sign papers, you block numbers, but part of you still checks the rearview mirror, waiting to see if someone's finally chasing you. No one ever did. And slowly, I stopped expecting them to. The loft became home in the way their house never was. I painted the walls myself, deep navy in the bedroom, warm clay in the living room. I chose every piece of furniture with the kind of precision that once went into pleasing others. Nothing here needed approval. And still, sometimes, in the quiet hours between dusk and dark, I thought about that night at the restaurant. How she looked when I walked in. How he didn't say a word. How the silence around that table wasn't awkward. It was familiar. A script we'd all learned by heart. Except me. I'd rewritten mine. My days were full now. Not busy, just full. Meetings that energized me, work that made sense. People who respected my voice because they didn't expect me to shrink it first. Then came the letter. Handwritten, no return address. The envelope was soft, expensive, the kind she always used. Inside, a folded page in her sharp, slanted script. It wasn't an apology, not really.
She said she regretted the way things unfolded, that she never intended for me to feel unwelcome, that family dynamics can be complicated. Not once did she say the word sorry, but she included a line that stood out. I underestimated what you were to him and what you were without him. I read it twice. It didn't feel like a compliment. It felt like a realization she came to too late. I placed the letter back in the envelope, filed it under things that no longer needed answers. Because by then, I was no longer angry. I was settled. There was a calm that came with knowing you survived, that you endured the erasure and still remembered your own name. And in that calm, something new began to grow. Possibility. Not for revenge, not for reconciliation, for self-respect, for choosing not to be chosen by people who never saw you clearly. I launched a new studio, just my name on the door, no partners, no compromises. Clients came, referrals grew, my inbox stayed full. And somewhere in the distance, I knew they were watching. Not reaching out, just watching. Watching the woman they once dismissed become someone they couldn't explain. There was no press release, no viral article, just steady growth, quiet credibility, the kind that didn't need to scream. It only needed to last. Last week, I walked past the restaurant again, the same one. Same lanterns in the window, same smell of rosemary and smoke curling out the door. It was quieter than I remembered. Maybe it always was, and I just hadn't been quiet enough to notice. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. The power of that place had already passed. Instead, I stood on the sidewalk across the street for a few minutes, watching the couples walk in, the laughter at the entrance, the clink of glasses from inside. And I thought about her face again, that smug little smile, how quickly it disappeared when Robert pulled out the chair. And how, even then, she didn't apologize. Because women like her don't say sorry. They orchestrate, they pretend, they destroy with etiquette. But they underestimate, always. She thought exclusion would break me, that being left out of a dinner would make me crumble, make me beg, make me disappear. Instead, it became the moment everything began. And now, months later, I see it so clearly. It wasn't just a dinner. It was a mirror. One that showed me exactly where I stood, and how little they thought of her. Who paid for the chairs they sat in. He still hasn't followed up, not since the voicemail, not since the email. Maybe he thought I'd come back when the silence became too loud. But the truth is, the silence is peaceful now. Because I filled it with truth, with intention, with things they never gave me, respect, freedom, clarity. Some nights I still hear his voice, not in longing, just as an echo, a what if. What if he had spoken up? What if he had said, she belongs here? What if he had fought for me the way I fought for us? But then I remember the silence, the shrug, the absence of resistance. And I understand. There are people who will love your presence, but they'll never defend it. And those are the ones you leave. So I did. And in doing so, I reclaimed something far more valuable than revenge. I reclaimed the narrative. Not by burning bridges, but by walking past them with my head high, my silence unshaken, my dignity intact. Let them explain why I'm no longer there. Let them stumble through the absence they created. I don't need them to say it out loud. I already know. They see it now. They lost the only woman in the room who never needed an invitation to belong. I never told anyone the full story. Not friends, not colleagues, not even the lawyer who helped me untangle what they once called a partnership. Because some truths don't need retelling. They don't ask for sympathy. They simply become part of the foundation beneath your feet.
Still, sometimes I imagine it. The moment someone asks him, "What happened?" I wonder if he stumbles, if he says she left, if he says it like a mystery, like something sudden, like something that just happened. Not something built year by year, moment by moment, a slow, silent erosion. Because that's what it was. It didn't begin with the dinner. It began the first time he let her speak over me. The first time he saw her dismiss me and said nothing. The first time he watched me shrink myself and whispered, "You're overreacting." The dinner was just the last stone in a crumbling wall. But it was enough. It made me remember who I was before I met him. Before I wrapped my ambition in compromise. Before I traded my vision for comfort. And once I remembered, I couldn't forget again. I'm not bitter. I don't need to be. Bitterness is for people who still want something back. I want nothing from them, not their validation, not their remorse, just distance. And I have it now. Every morning, I wake up in a space I chose, designed, built. Every project I touch turns into something more than I expected because I'm not waiting for someone to approve it first. I wear my name like armor now. Not flashy, not loud, just undeniable. And when people ask where I've been, I smile. I say, building. Because that's all I've ever done. Build, endure, begin again. That's the part they never saw. They thought quiet meant weak. They thought patience meant passivity. They thought my silence was submission. But it was strategy. Waiting, watching, choosing the moment. And when it came, I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I stood, I walked, and I never looked back. I didn't need to. Looking back only tempts nostalgia to rewrite the facts. And the truth is, I wasn't happy. Not for a long time. I was surviving beautifully, smiling dutifully, performing womanhood like a well-rehearsed role. But inside, something was starving. Now, I feed it. Not with revenge, with restoration. With the kind of mornings where no one interrupts my thoughts. With work that reflects me, not him. With friendships that don't ask me to downplay my brilliance. Somewhere out there, he's probably still telling himself I left because of one bad night. Maybe she's still pretending it was a misunderstanding. Maybe his sisters whisper theories at brunch. Let them. Because what they'll never say, what they'll never be able to admit, is that the night they left me out was the night I found the door. And it was unlocked.
They had tried to keep me small. But it wasn't the exclusion that burned. It was the realization that I had allowed myself to be manageable, decorated silence. Never again. Now, when I enter rooms, I don't wait to be seated. I speak. I take up space. I claim what's mine. And when someone tries to diminish me with a smile, I don't match it. I hold their days until the smile dies. That's what strength looks like now. Not fire, not fury, just precision, presence. I still get letters from women, clients, colleagues, strangers who followed the quiet trail of my departure and saw themselves in it. They say things like, "I didn't know I was allowed to leave." And I tell them, "You are." No announcement needed, no spectacle, just the quiet decision to stop shrinking, to stop asking for what you already deserve, to stop sitting at tables where your chair is conditional. I've built something far greater than a comeback. I've built peace. Not the soft kind, the sharpened kind. The kind you earn after walking through rooms where your absence was planned and still choosing not to disappear.
I don't regret any of it. Not the silence, not the endurance, not even the years I spent invisible. Because now I know the cost, and I will never pay it again. If you've ever been erased quietly, then reclaimed yourself louder than they ever expected, subscribe. There's more where this came from. Thank you all for listening to my story until the very end. I hope that, even just a little, what I've shared can bring something meaningful to you. Goodbye, and see you again.